Guys, gals and non-binary pals, Captain Catherine Janeway here with Rhyme Signatures, the nerdiest music review this side of risking life, limb, your entire crew and reputation on the meagerest of possibilities that there might very well be coffee in that nebula. And today we're going to be doing a review of the new Blood Incantation album, Absolute Elsewhere. If there's one thing I've learned about metal fans, it's that changing the formula of an established product is generally perceived as a terrible idea. Now, it doesn't matter if this new approach or idea is the best executed version of the new that could possibly be. Most fans of a band will hiss, spit, cry and generally throw a little bit of a hissy fit if their favourite band dares to do anything other than release 17 slight variations on that record what I really like. Opeth took a serious hit when they dared come out with Heritage, Metallica got it in the neck with the Black Album, and God help Avenged Sevenfold after they put out Life is But a Dream. Even the subject of today's video, death metal darlings Blood Incantation, certainly got their fair share of raised eyebrows when they put out Time Wave Zero a couple of years back, with many fans shouting boo and phooey at them for putting out what was essentially a minimalist ambient synth album. Now, I personally found it to be a jarring but not entirely unwelcome pivot, but I certainly didn't want this to be the main focus of the band's direction going forwards. So it was with a certain degree of trepidation that I followed the announcement of this new album, Absolute Elsewhere, and I started wondering if we were going to be getting a continuation of the band's new experimental style, or if we were going to be going back to the classic death metal that made the band so popular with Starspawn and Hidden History of the Human Race. Well guys, guess what? It's kind of a bit of both. So, I'll be honest, I got into the band kind of late, only really discovering them by listening to Hidden History last year, and it was mostly due to some peer pressure from some of my immediate contemporaries insisting that to fall prey of ignorance to this record was to do myself and my ear canals a massive disservice. And you know what? My immediate social circle were absolutely bang on the money. Hidden History was an absolute ripper of an album and satisfied that death metal craving unlike anything else. I subsequently went back and listened to Starspawn and I continued to love what these guys were pumping out. Diligently, of course, I listened to Time Wave Zero with caution, as a lot of people had told me it kinda sucked. But honestly, I don't know, I kinda liked it. I mean, sure, it felt more like a weird side project than a real Blood Incantation album, but I felt they still did a great job with what they were trying to do. Now, I understand if people might be concerned that this new album is more of that, and I'll tell you straight away, there are elements of the spacey, synthy, atmospheric filler that was so prevalent on that album. But the good news is that the band has remembered the death metal too, and has created a, frankly, wonderful marriage of these two conflicting styles to make for an album that flits brilliantly between the two of them, never leaving the death metal fan bereft of riffs for too long, nor the synth fan not floating off into the emptiness of deep space for too long. Right, I'll be real with you all, I've honestly been getting slightly annoyed with the state of new music releases of late. I keep becoming convinced that my Album of the Year slot is now secured, it is safe from any would-be challenger, and then some annoying little upstart comes along and completely upsets my apple cart. In case you hadn't guessed, Absolute Elsewhere is one such challenger, and honestly I've been really struggling to think of anything that I've actually not enjoyed from this release, as it really does tick all my expected boxes when it comes to modern metal, modern prog, and honestly modern music in general. Now, from the name of the band, if you're new to them that is, you would correctly assume that there is a lot of dissonance, a lot of aggression, growled vocals, big sounds and what have you to be expected. You'd be absolutely right with this, and this is felt right from the starting gun, as the Stargate Tablet 1 wastes no time in establishing the ground rules. Thundering, rolling drums, deep, throaty vocals, thrashy, angry guitars. It's all very death metal, all very hallmarks of the genre, but it only lasts for a couple of minutes before the brakes are slammed on hard and Blood Incantation reveal the ace in their sleeve for the album. It becomes spacey, slow, thoughtful and deliberate with massive avenues and atmospherics thrown into the mix. The death metal melts away and the band shows us a star map of the whole universe. It's a little jarring at first, but every time I've replayed the album, I've fallen more and more in love with it. Now, this isn't just the synthy, aimless ambience of Time Wave Zero, though. The DNA of what that band played with on that album is definitely on show, sure, but this feels like it has more in common with Pink Floyd's Shine On You Crazy Diamond than anything the band has put out before. The keyboards swell, the guitars soar, and you'd be hard-pressed not to immediately draw comparisons to David Gilmour's axe work rather than Chuck Schuldina's. But things segue back to the death metal side once again, feeling like you're travelling at 1,000 miles an hour before crashing back to Earth from the nebulous realms of outer space. It's a complete whiplash and could take the unaware listener by surprise, and it's not the first time this is going to happen on the album. The Stargate Tablet 2 is an almost entirely synth-driven piece, but again, this is not just the empty atmospherics of Time Wave Zero, but carries more in common with electronica acts like Tangerine Dream or The Orb, and it serves as an incredible demonstration of just how versatile the band are, not just with their instrumentation, but with their compositional skills as well. To be able to move so easily between such angularly opposing styles is a rare skill in modern music, but to make them work so well, so beautifully in tandem with each other is rarer still. I also get some not dissimilar vibes to Porcupine Tree's Voyage 34, especially with the reverb-laden spoken word dialogue that occasionally plays in the background during the first half of the song. But just as Tablet 1 eventually brought us back to the crushing depths of some of the nastiest riffing and filthiest grunts, so does Tablet 2. A huge, diving riff plunges you back headfirst into the mire, and it is such a rush of culture shock that it makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. Now, what I especially like about the album is how it is essentially split into these two huge 20-plus minute tracks of The Stargate and The Message, with each one managing to sound, quite distinct from the other, but married perfectly against their own individual sounds and styles. I personally feel that The Message carries a lot more of the metal side of the band than The Stargate does, but they both manage to dance between the band's two very distinct halves almost perfectly. You're never left too long wrestling with the riff machine before being thrown into the depths of outer space, and vice versa, making for an album that feels like an intricate game of tennis at times, the listener being constantly volleyed between these two dramatically opposing styles and musical approaches. For me, it makes for an album that never feels, boring or anything. It never lets up and never lets you get too comfortable in one place. And what I appreciate a lot about this is that it encourages repeated listening with almost zero effort. At 44 minutes long, there is plenty to sink your teeth into, but not so long as to feel exhausting, a fact which is further compounded by its ability to switch between its musical aptitudes with fluidic precision. Blood Incantation may have just been dipping their toes in the progressive and experimental world in 2022 with Time Wave Zero, but Absolute Elsewhere feels like they are fully embracing the world of progressive metal. The sheer bravado and creativity on display is so far above and beyond most of everything else that's come out this year, it feels like Blood Incantation are running their own race. Of the two main pieces here, I think I slightly prefer The Message over The Stargate, but that's honestly because my preference for the band's sounds does still lean on the death metal side. Hidden History is, after all, one of the absolute best examples of the genre in recent times, and I feel this half of the album better represents that side of the band's approach and style. But in truth, both of the tracks here are stunning in their scope and ambition, and it really makes for an album that's incredibly hard to pick fault at, especially if you're like me and enjoy your death metal more on the experimental side. Right, yeah, okay, so despite my heavy praise of this album, there are times when I can't help but imagine that this is likely to alienate or displace some of the fan base of the band. The backlash against Time Wave Zero was quite interesting, shall we say, and I can imagine some Blood Incantation fans being upset or disappointed with the continued inclusion of the spacier, more atmospheric moments that were explored on that album. This is not a pure death metal album, this is something beyond that, and your appreciation of this new and varied approach by the band will largely depend on how much you really miss that initial burst of aggression and vitriol explored on the first two albums. There are many moments on this record where it is easy to forget that you are listening to a band who are, for all intents and purposes, a death metal band. If you don't like Pink Floyd, you're likely going to resent the big David Gilmour-esque sequences on the tablet 2 of both the Stargate and the Message. There's an easy argument to be made that the stylistic switches are abrupt and uncomfortable, and that feels especially true of tablet 1 of the Message, segueing into tablet 2, and then tablet 2 into tablet 3. There's very little warning or build-up, just a hard slam on the brakes and a quick 90-degree turn into outer space, or back into the murky depths of hell. This is an album that's going to take a bit of getting used to, as this feels like the next evolutionary step up for the band, feeling equally at home aping classic moments from bands like Death or Morbid Angel as they do Pink Floyd and Tangerine Dream. I feel the band, though, still has a bit to learn about blending these elements more succinctly together, and I think that if they can work a bit more on their transitions between these moments, then it will help to assuage any concerns that people might have with any jarring differentials during the album's runtime. So, what else can I possibly say about Blood Incantation's absolute elsewhere? This feels like it is yet another album tailor-made for little old me, and it is the next in line to be eyeing my year-end list with a particular fervour. I've had a tremendously good time with this album, and I've really been struggling to listen to much else at all recently. It's got just the right amount of everything that I love, all in the same place. I can listen to this one to headbang until my neck snaps, and I can then lie down, drink in the peace and atmosphere to recover, before getting back up to dive right back into the mosh pit. Now, I can appreciate that this album may not be what OG fans of Blood Incantation were looking for in the wake of Time Wave Zero, but I feel that if you can approach this one with an open mind, then you're likely to find a whole new world awaiting you. This is a great entry point as well for people who may be a little sour on typical death metal, as the sheer breadth of variety and sounds is sure to appeal to a much vaster range of people. I personally would recommend grabbing a physical copy of this one, if only just for that absolutely killer album art, but also to support a true progression of modern death metal. If this is the future of the genre, then count me in, as the good ship Blood Incantation has just released, for my money at least, their magnum opus. This is all, of course, guys, just my opinion, so if you loved or hated this one, please talk to me about your experiences of the album in the comments down below. Please do drop me a thumbs up if you like the video. Please do consider subscribing to the channel as well if you've been enjoying my irreverent content so far. But until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures pretty odd.